today we are actually like smashing the bottle against the boat here when it comes to the SCYTHE Marketplace. And it's, again, it's culminating a lot of engineering time and development that have gone into making this thing a reality, mostly because we not only needed to create have a storefront for this whole thing that allows for uploads and downloads, but we also had to do a lot of security stuff and a lot of validation stuff. And we had to add the capability into the product itself, the SCYTHE platform, to import arbitrary third-party things, both that are signed by us because, you know, we've reviewed them and whatnot, and ones that people could just sideload themselves. And so to put a more fine a point on it, to talk about what we're actually got, and we'll show it here in a moment, there's really kind of two pieces to this that are important. One is the SCYTHE Marketplace itself. So the SCYTHE Marketplace is a secure ecosystem, is the way we're thinking about it, for SCYTHE modules. And for those who have maybe kind of heard about SCYTHE or whatever, you know, SCYTHE is a platform that allows you to make custom malware for defense validation and controls validation and adversary emulation and simulation. It allows you to do that inside of minutes. And the modules themselves are just the plugins or the bones of the platform that allow you to say, oh, I want to have my piece of malware phone home over DNS, and I can do that with one click. Or I want to have a keylogger module that only takes 3 arguments, start, stop, and dump, right? Well, you can make a keylogger module that does that, and so on and so forth. So traditionally, this has been something that people have been able to do. There's always been an SDK for it, but for the most part, it was all written in kind of a native language, right? You had to write it in C, which not everybody was super comfortable with doing. And so what we started to do is create better and better documentation for the way the module SDK worked. And then we released the version of the SDK that had Python capabilities so people could write Python modules. And now, today, we're launching the marketplace itself, where third-party vendors, is what we call them, third-party developers, can create these modules, and they can do this without having SCYTHE installed. You do not need to be a SCYTHE, you know, user or customer in order to build out modules, and then those can be uploaded into the marketplace and then given away for free or sold to the SCYTHE customer base. So it's very Google Play in nature, in that anybody can build a SCYTHE module out, and we've done a number of things to make that as easy as we can, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. But we've also made it so we can control and really monitor who's involved in the marketplace. So that takes the burden off of the vendors or the developers to having to validate who's going to be running the code they're creating, right? And so this kind of insulates them a wee bit from having to validate every single customer that may want to buy their module, because SCYTHE can do that up front. So it's this kind of fun like ecosystem that people can build out offensive capabilities or new malware capabilities that customers can use to validate their defenses. And it's really exciting stuff. So that's kind of it in the nutshell. And really one of the main drivers, just to, as kind of the last thing to mention on it, is we're hoping that these modules that are built by third parties are going to drive innovation forward. Because, you know, SCYTHE, our team of engineers, we want to focus on things that only our team can do, you know, specializing in implant stuff or integrations with third parties or new server reporting and cool items in that way. Like, that's stuff that the platform that we want to continue to nurture. But the ecosystem and the industry can drive innovation and updates forward, right? And here's a classic example: privilege escalation. There's a billion ways to do that. And there's new ways being developed all the time, and old ways are falling off the back. So instead of the SCYTHE user base having to wait for our engineering team to get the cycles to update this thing and do that or whatever, if someone builds a privilege escalation module and they are the primary caretaker of it, they can update that on the fly just in time. And that can drive that industry forward. And so that's one of the big things we're really hoping to see generated out of the marketplace.
Yeah, and just to like put this in perspective, right? And this kind of goes into a talk that Bryce and I are going to do at the Bug Crowd, the Level Up conference. And it's titled, "It's Not a Vulnerability, It's a Feature," right? And this happens quite a bit. I mean, I talk to a lot of people that find vulnerabilities and try to responsibly disclose that. And we've kind of gone through that already, right? You're doing something, you find a vulnerability, you figure out how to responsibly disclose it. Sometimes you could get paid for it through bug bounty and whatnot. But what happens when that vendor comes back and they tell you, that's actually not a vulnerability, that's actually a feature, like, we're not paying you? What do you do then? And then currently, before Marketplace, you just kind of wrote a blog and then get hated on by a lot of blue teamers because you are dropping like new knowledge and there's no detection and you're just like irresponsibly doing this. So really what the Marketplace is doing here is giving it a way to release this information, a way where you might be able to get paid for it. And we don't know how much you're going to get paid. We're creating the infrastructure for it, right? So we are hosting the Play Store, the app, right? And from there, you put your module, and we need to figure out, well, like, what is the going rate for your feature capability that you found, and see what enterprises are willing to pay for that, because we know that these capabilities aren't going to be patched, right? And that's kind of what Olaf was talking about as well, is that a lot of these things aren't preventable. Like, you just need to test it against yourself and figure out how to detect it. So you put it in the Marketplace, and an enterprise can then grab it. If you do it for free, that's awesome. Everything we're launching will be for free today. You'll then be able to test yourself and then figure out those detections, right? And someone asked a great question about how you go through it, testing in non-production first and then seeing if it's possible in your organization. So I'm super excited for this, Adam.
Yeah, it is really exciting. And just for the people, who are hearing what we're talking about, and again, don't have familiarity with Scythe, like Scythe is really designed to be a post-exploitation framework. That's the point of it. And so when we talk about, dropping new vulnerabilities, we're not talking about like arbitrary O days that kick over everything. We could be talking just something as simple as a new novel way of doing something, like taking screenshots on a Windows desktop, or, the newest version of sticky keys for keylogging. That's something that you could develop out and build a Scythe module for, put in the Marketplace and say, okay, here's a novel way that I don't think people are detecting this kind of TTP. Well, somebody should download it and give it a shot and see, right? And it's that idea that it should only take a few minutes for someone to say, oh, well, we bought this really expensive EDR that monitors for every ransomware under the sun. Well, let's validate that. Let's prove that it can do that, and let's do that in minutes. And we can do that obviously natively with our Scythe capabilities, but there's always new ways to make new kinds of ransomware and new kinds of behaviors and all these sorts of things that folks who want to develop these modules can build out themselves. And then, Scythe operators get the benefit of that kind of knowledge base. And, as a vendor, as a Scythe Marketplace developer, you can set whatever price you want. We do not know what the going rate for this sort of stuff will be. But the point is that you, as a Marketplace vendor, can submit these things and not have to worry about validating the people who are buying it. Again, we've invited Scythe customers into that, but we can curate this sort of thing. So it helps take some of the burden off of that.
And if I were to create something like this, right? Create this module, am I locked into this Scythe Marketplace, or can I release that somewhere else?
You could, it's a fair game either way. In fact, we designed the whole thing so that even if, say you have Scythe and you have no interest in interacting with the Marketplace, but you do have interest in building your own custom modules, just like that kind of Google Play idea, you can actually sideload custom or unsigned Scythe modules. So you can build out your own and you never have to share with anybody, or you could share publicly. It's entirely up to you. I mean, obviously there might be some trepidation of someone who's using Scythe downloading an arbitrary module off of GitHub, turning off validation and sideloading it and then deploying it in their enterprise. But with choices come consequences. So yeah, but the point is you're not locked in. You can publish this to make it whatever license you'd like. And again, if you want to create these modules and have nothing to do with the Marketplace and just publish them, you can do that too. And people can choose whether or not to sideload them. That's freedom developers have.
That's awesome. And We got a question here, but I think you're going to cover a little later, and that's how do you prevent module cloning? And that's part of the the backend infrastructure was created. So Aaron asked that question. I'll let you do the demo and show this off, and then we'll get to more Q&A.
Yeah, and so just kind of to move forward a slide here. There's this thing called the SCYTHE Marketplace, and instead of just showing a slide on it, let me go ahead and actually show it to folks. So hold on, let me share a different window here. I think this is it. Yeah. So this is the SCYTHE Marketplace, and it is an app store for all intents and purposes. It has modules in it. It has the ability to be browsed. It has lists of vendors. And right now we just have the native SCYTHE ones. We're actually evaluating a number of third-party modules, like literally as we speak. So in the coming days or weeks, you're actually going to see this fill up with more potential vendors. But it's easy enough to just go in here once you've signed up and say, oh, this one is free. We can go ahead and click install, and you get the download for that. And it shows up, and you can install it right in your SCYTHE server and the whole 9 yards. And as far as from a vendor perspective, it's really a trivial process to submit these things. You know, once I'm signed up as a vendor, I can go into manage apps, submit a new app, and then you walk through the simple process of what is it? What is its description? What operating systems does it support? How did you build it? Was it done via, is it run a Python runtime or native? Icon, summaries, EULAs, blah, 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 blah. You submit these things, you set a price, and then it's submitted to the SCYTHE team for review. And at this point, we can make all sorts of assessments of, does this look identical to something else in the marketplace? Does this actually run without crashing people's endpoints? And do a little bit of evaluation there. And again, we don't even necessarily need to have source code, right? We're just here to kind of do a little bit of QA to make sure that the module that's been submitted doesn't just fail outright. But we then also can evaluate, is this thing inherently identical to something else we submitted? And we can make those assessments on a case-by-case basis, right? And this is something that we're slowly rolling out, right? Right now, to become a developer for the marketplace is invite only. But again, you don't need to wait for a SCYTHE invitation into this front end here in order to start building out modules, because we've published on GitHub the SCYTHE SDK and the Module Buster utility, which I'm going to show everybody here in a moment. And with these handful of PDFs and this utility, you can start building SCYTHE modules literally as we speak, like right now. And it can be that easy to do, where you could start to build up this suite and say, hey, now that I've got all these modules under my belt, I want to see if, like, I would like to become a published developer in the marketplace. And then we can have that conversation and perform that evaluation and, you know, publish some of them, maybe all of them, who knows? Like, we can walk through this. And this is, again, very new for us. You know, it's not every day that an organization like ours like stands up a marketplace for offensive capabilities potentially. So it's a bit of an experiment, but we're really excited about the potential here. And there's a whole nother world that we can drive forward with this marketplace. Right now, it's just an app store. But one day, you know, we could talk about the ability to have bug bounties on top of these things, where an organization can say, hey, I really want a SCYTHE module that does X, Y, or Z, and I'm willing to pay this amount for it. And that thing can exist in the marketplace. It could exist out of band. We have a lot of freedom here. So with kind of covering, I don't know if there's any more questions on the marketplace itself.
There are a couple.
Okay.
So
okay, let's dive into those.
How can we do feature requests to support your team in future updates of the marketplace? And I mentioned that one of the features we're kind of looking into building in the future is the ability to bounty something. So an enterprise comes and they want a particular module, and be able to say, hey, I need this module created, and I'm willing to pay this amount. And then another vendor within this marketplace will be able to say, okay, I'll create it and be able to sell it for that amount. And you know, through the marketplace, anyone else would be able to buy it for that same amount as well. There is no lock-in though, so you can create a module and upload it into your own SCYTHE instance. You can share a module on the back end as long as you're in development mode. No jailbreak required, right? To do that. And then the other question here is, how will you prevent the marketplace from becoming the cool equivalent of Apple's App Store? Also considering their recent hammering down of things like, I'm guessing the Epic games is and Fortnite issues is what GJ is mentioning.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right? Because again, we are now trying to create an ecosystem and perform curation for tools that are designed to be injected into memory on corporate enterprise workstations, right? And so it's that's a pretty interesting challenge for us as an organization to go after. And I can't make any sort of like sweeping guarantees of we will never do this or that or what have you. And it's not because I don't want to, it's because this is a bit of an experiment in inherently. We've not really seen anything in the industry that is this kind of thing. Because again, like if you look at modules in open source framework, well, everybody's got that immediately done, right? And so what we're talking about is the ability to have tradecraft, proprietary exercises be delivered to a curated customer base, which is just inherently a wee bit different. And I see Bryson coming off, because Bryson has like a really great way of describing the vision here, and I'll leave it to him.
We will never Apple you. That is a promise from me to all of you. We are not going to fuck this up. We have spent years personally, individually, as a company, giving back to this community and trying to do the right thing. We will never screw over developers. We see the marketplace not only as a conversation on how we can make it better, because it literally is the instantiation of a community for offense. And it also represents the technical side of that. So both the people and the tech are going to be elements that are going to be an ongoing conversation, but you heard it directly from the unicorn's mouth. As long as I have anything to say with it, we're never going to do anything like that.
Well, there you have it, right? The person who could say these sorts of things has put the staff in the bridge. So and it's one of those, it is really important because we want to be good stewards of the community here as well, right? This is not, trying to us be a really weird like intermediary and all this stuff and dictate what shall and shall not be. We do have to perform some evaluation, and we don't want people like pushing modules that brick people's workstations or are actually like proper malware, right? Not just like doing it for simulation or emulation purposes. But I think that, Bryson, you said it well, like this is our intent and this is what we want to do.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit there and give an example, right? So I create a new module and I put it on the marketplace. I charge $8,000 for that module. Scythe is going to get a extremely small cut of that just to support the backend infrastructure. That is what we're releasing today, this marketplace. You would get most of that. And that I believe we're still figuring out that number, but it's what, 5% of the overall cost of what you get. So it's very, very small. We're not talking about Apple-like percentages. I think theirs are like 30% or things like that. The SCYTHE Marketplace is for us. It's for all of you, for enterprise to use, etc. This is not our method of making money. Our method for that is creating the SCYTHE platform and selling that to enterprise. So this is really all our giving back to the community and really trying to solve a problem that we haven't mentioned yet, right? It's like the elephant in the room is this whole offensive security tool debate, right? That things that aren't vulnerabilities, right? Because we already covered bug bounty, that kind of was solved, right? This is techniques. They're not vulnerabilities, they're features, yet they're features that bad guys are using against organizations to steal money and do bad things. So what we're doing is creating this secure ecosystem, and Adam will go into that a little bit more on how we allow certain people to create, right? And there's crypto involved, right? There's keys involved, etc. But it's all for that. It's for the sharing of it. If you want to take your code and open source it and put it on GitHub, you can do that as well. There's no lock-in, and it's really, it's the ecosystem, but the ecosystem can't exist without all of you participating in it. So that's really our big release today, is that backend infrastructure that we call the marketplace. And to create modules, I think Adam's gonna talk about that.
I'm going to show people that right now, like how you make a module, and hopefully what you all about to see will not only like help, but also because I see there's a bunch of questions about like, well, how do you actually make these things? What's the framework they're built on? Like, let me show you. But there's also kind of an upside down way to think about what we're doing here in the marketplace. So give me 1 second and share this. Can people see this module buster thing? Okay. So the thing I wanted to mention was if you think about this upside down, like maybe you've written a really cool adversary test or a new capability and you've already published it and you're thinking, you know, I spent all this free time on this open source emulation tool or TTP exercise, or you've spent a bunch of time like helping with Atomic Red Team and you've got some other cool ideas on how to do those sorts of discrete tests for like MITRE ATT&CK stuff. Well, if you say, wait a second, I've already done this thing, why don't I make a little bit of money off of it too? Like, why can't I just monetize that? Well, it is trivial to port certain kinds of tools to Scythe modules. And that's what I'm going to show right now. So what I'm running right here, this is the Scythe utility called Module Buster. In this case, it's 1000. That's the version we're on right now. And what this is, it's a module development GUI, basically. And this is up on our GitHub under the SDK, and you can download and install this right now. And what this does is it guides you through the creation of a module. So literally, if I wanted to go make a module, I can click the new module button and it populates this. And then I say, oh, okay, well, I want to make a Scythe module. And today I'll make it in, I want to write Python because I don't want to write any C code or DLLs or whatever. So I'll click Python 3. I'll make it for Windows, is CPU architecture. We'll have it be a capability module, which means it's actions on objective instead of doing a communication module, which is like C2. And we'll give it a name and a logo and blah, 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 blah. Hit create. And what happens when you click create here is we create a directory structure for you. In this case, I put it on my desktop and it's called modules, and there's a Python 3 one, and there's this, you know, echo, and we create this entire directory structure for you, build a bunch of build scripts out, source files, and a whole 9 yards. And this thing is ready for you to start building out. Now, one thing we realized, because by default we build a module called echo for you. So if you packaged it and installed it in Scythe, you would send it a message and it would bounce that message back from the endpoint. Easy enough. It's all, again, all in the PDFs. It's all on GitHub. You can use that immediately. But one of the things we realize is that one of the best ways to think about how to use Scythe modules and the Module Buster tool is to port, like, say, Python utilities or scripts or whatever you've already written to Scythe modules. And to do that, to demonstrate just how easy that is, we actually went through an exercise and built out and ported a tool to Scythe. And so that's again up on our GitHub. It's called blog porting LMO to OOB. There's a companion blog post in the Scythe library that I wrote. You can look at all that later. But what we did is we evaluated a bunch of different Python scripts and tools, and we settled on the LMO OOB tool by Rob Fuller of Mubix. And so huge shout out to Mubix for like helping with this and like helping me build this thing out, because I'm a head of product. Like, I'm not an engineer. I don't write code every day, but I was able to port this thing and use a really cool tool, which, you know, all is kind of simple in nature. If you're not familiar with LMO OOB, it does a check to see if it can egress out of an off of an endpoint over a variety of different ports that you provide. And then it can also do out of band like DNS phone home. And so the thought was, well, let's take this existing Python script, which is like less than 50 lines of Python here, and put this into a Scythe module so that that module could be installed from the marketplace and then put in memory on an endpoint via the Python 3 runtime, and then detonated and fired, right? That was the goal. And we could do that entire process without owning Scythe. So, and all we had to do was I literally went into Module Buster, I clicked new module, I built out my skeleton for it. And then I had to do 3 things effectively. The first one was I had to make a couple of changes to Rob's LMO OOB script. And basically I like made a global array instead of just printing everything out to, with bprint here. I made a global array, so I collected all the results, and then I wrapped the main loop in like a main function. So that was thing number one. That's all I had to do. Thing number two is I had to go to the client side of the thing that runs in memory on an endpoint, and I added a single import here, LMO, and then I added like 6 lines of code. So I call that thing, the main function in LMO, and I get the results of it, and then I pass those back up. And again, Scythe handles all the encoding and C2 and everything, and then encryption, we do all that. So I just had to call that slightly tweaked LMO script and give it the parameters I wanted, and then return its results. And then I had to just slightly tweak the server side of the Scythe. So, I gave it some arguments here and created a message body and, say, oh, this is my namespace, pass this on down to the endpoint, depending on these arguments, so on and so forth. So it's very straightforward. Again, all this code is up on GitHub, so you can actually see and like get started with this. But that was it. I tweaked 3 files, basically, added a dozen lines of Python or so, and then I was able to, again, without having Scythe installed, build this module out and then run it via the Module Buster tool. So we have this validation capability here where I say, okay, I want to take one of my modules, and we'll do the Scythe LMO one. And so we select that. We select which architecture we want to emulate here. Mine doesn't take any dependencies. It can run with default parameters. I then select this runtime, which is included. So we've got all these, it's the Python 3 runtime. We'll pick that. There it is. And then I just click validate. And what's happening in the background here is Module Buster is instantiating the same Python 3 runtime that will actually be dropping in the memory on like a Scythe when somebody deploys Scythe to an endpoint. It drops that runtime into memory and fires this module. And we do the exact same thing here. So I just ran on this workstation this little LMO thing that I ported from Rob's tool, and I fired it in memory. It's the exact same way that it'll happen on a production endpoint. And there it goes. So it tested to see if it could get to that destination over 80. Woot woot, means it worked. Easy enough. And now, if I wanted to, I could just quickly and easily package this up and either install it in a Scythe server, like sideload it, the same way you can do with APKs, right, on Android, or we could actually prep it to be submitted to the marketplace and then be validated and signed by Scythe and published to the store. So that's like the fastest demonstration of Scythe we can give when it comes to developing modules, right? Where we can go in and use a single tool to build out the skeleton, write some Python, validate it, and then package it up, and you're good to go at that point. And so hopefully this is useful. Again, there's a ton of URLs I'll throw in the Discord here in a bit, but at the end of the day, there's this one in our Scythe GitHub. Here, this will tell you all the things where if you go to SDK and porting, blog porting LMO OOB, these 2 things will really all you need to get up and running with Scythe module development. And again, you can build modules and never be involved in the marketplace, or you can port stuff you already built to modules, or you could build your own and sideload them in the Scythe. It's totally up to you all. Or you could build them up and sell them to Scythe customers on your own. Like, you have so much freedom here from a developer standpoint. I can't emphasize that enough. So that's that. I think we've got one more slide here that might be worth showing. Where is that? Here we go. This is the flow. This is really what you have to go through and do. You download the SDK, set up your dev environment. Obviously, you build it out. You can you sign up for the marketplace. You work with us on that. Submit it. We review it, and then once it's good to go, publish. Available to Scythe customers. Full stop. So, 7 steps in a unicorn circle. There it is. Easy enough.